So before we got started with any tips and tricks, I first wanted to just explore some of the basics here of journals in Business Central. I'm going to navigate to our general journal window here, and we can see that we already have a couple batches here set up. And I just want to talk about batches here in the system. It's probably a pretty novel concept to you guys. You're probably familiar with batches if you've worked in any other accounting systems. Most accounting systems I have used have utilized batches. So it's just a different way for you to group your transactions together. For example, here we can see that we have a default journal batch and a different batch for monthly recurring journal entries. And you could also create a batch, let's say if you had multiple users in the system and each user wanted to have their own specific batch for their own entries. That way, they're not tripping all over each other when they're trying to enter entries in the system. And next, I just want to touch a little bit on the different templates in the system. So basically, all the journals in the system, they're based off of the same table on the back end. So they all pretty much operate the same way. For example, the payment journal or cash receipt journal is basically your general journal, just in a different format. So the payment journal is a template of the general journal. It's just set up to enable easier entry of payments into the system. So today we're mostly going to be working with the general journals when I'm showing you guys these tips and tricks. But I just wanted to mention that a lot of these tips and tricks, they can be utilized in the other journals as well. So the fixed asset journal or your payment journals or your cash receipts journals, you can do a lot of these tricks in any journal throughout the system. So I'm going to navigate to my general journal here, and I want to demonstrate one of my favorite features of Business Central. And if you've listened to any of my other webinars, you'll know how much I love the way Business Central integrates with other Microsoft products. And in the case of the general journal, this one here integrates with Excel very well. What I can do is I can utilize this Open in Excel button. I'm just going to click on it here to bring up this journal, this general journal entry in Excel. And so this will allow me to view this entry in Excel. I can leverage my Excel knowledge that I have. I know a lot of accountants or people who work in accounting, they already have a great knowledge of Excel. So being able to leverage that knowledge is great. And this is the Open in Excel feature that I used here. So if I navigate back to Business Central, I used Open in Excel. So this just opens up this entry in Excel to allow me to view it. Maybe I can save this entry if I wanted to refer back to it after, for multiple different reasons. But there's actually an even more powerful function here that we can utilize, and it's called the Edit in Excel. So basically what that's going to do, it's going to open up this journal entry just the same as it has for the Open in Excel button. But what it's going to allow us to do is make changes to the entry in Excel and then publish those changes right back to Business Central. So for example, if we wanted to change, half of these account numbers to a different account, we can change one and fill it down and then publish that change right back into Business Central. Whereas if we tried to change all these accounts here in Business Central, you would have to do it one by one by one. Okay, so a great time-saving feature, and very powerful feature that there's numerous ways you can utilize it. Okay, so the next tip I can give to you guys is that you should personalize these batches so that it's more suitable to your needs. So as we know, no company or person is the same, and therefore Business Central gives us the flexibility to set up our journals the way that's easiest for us to use them. Okay, so the first thing we're going to see here when we open up our journal is that we have this fact box on the side here. So you guys are probably familiar with these fact boxes by now. They show up throughout the system, and based on what window you're on, they show different stuff. So it looks like the one here on this journal is just showing us information about the line that we've selected. So this may or may not be useful, but from our purposes today, I'm going to close this down here, and that's going to open up a little bit more real estate for us to view our entry a little bit better. And so the next thing I wanted to talk about was the ability to personalize this window. And so we can therefore add or remove fields, or even rearrange the fields so that as we're tabbing through when we're creating our entry, it's in just something that's more fluid to what we're used to. So if you're more used to, um, you know, putting the tax group code before the description for whatever reason, you utilize this personalized feature here under the gear. We're going to go to add field. So this is going to allow us to add fields onto the report, but also we can now grab and drag these fields into different positions. Okay, so just as simple as that. As we can see here, my document type is blank. So if I'm not utilizing this field, I can simply click on the little red arrow here and hide it. Okay, and same thing with currency code. If we're not a multi-currency company, why don't we just go ahead and hide this column for us, right? So just to give us a little bit more real estate and to allow us to tab through a lot easier when we're entering journal entries. Okay, so you can even see that there's a list here of a whole bunch of different fields that aren't showing. So I would recommend going into this add field window here to open up this pane to see if perhaps there is any fields here that you guys could utilize in your situations. All right, now time for one of my favorite tips and tricks here in regards to Business Central, and that would be the ability to perform math within the cells here. So I'm going to demonstrate that. So let's say we have an external document that we're working with, and we want to add up a few figures from that spreadsheet. Let's say that's outside of Business Central, and we want to plug those figures into a line in our journal entry. Now, let's say there was multiple figures we wanted to add into one line, and normally that would require us going to a calculator or using Excel to maybe add up those numbers. But I just wanted to show you guys that we can actually add up numbers in Excel or in Business Central as well. So for example here, we have an amount of 750, but let's say that as per our spreadsheet, this amount was 750, plus there was another line that was $500, and there was another line that was, say, $250. Okay, so instead of taking that outside of Business Central, add up all those numbers, and then taking that total into Business Central, we can just do the addition right here in the cells. So if I tab off the cell, we're going to see it does a little calculation, and it calculates $1,500 for us. Okay, so a great time-saving feature, and just one of those hidden tips and tricks that not many people know about. So another thing I wanted to talk to you guys about, give you guys a tip, was to learn your keyboard shortcuts. And to find out what keyboard shortcuts are applicable to Business Central, we can simply go to our keyboard shortcuts under Help here. And this is going to pull up a list of a whole bunch of keyboard shortcuts for us in the system. Okay, so not all of these are going to be applicable to you, but a lot of these may actually be real time savers. And before I was a consultant, I was an accountant, and before that, I was a data entry clerk as I was getting into the accounting industry. And being able to enter in your entries in a quick and efficient way is invaluable. And even if you're not entering in these entries, say you're training somebody on how to enter them, being able to give them the correct keyboard shortcuts to ensure that there's minimal errors and minimal interruption to the rest of their working day is very, very valuable. Okay, so learn those keyboard shortcuts. I also believe that if I navigate back there, there's a nice picture here that you can print out. I have this printed out and pasted on my wall in my office at work. Okay, and just to demonstrate, I think there's one here that I utilize quite often actually when I'm working with Business Central that isn't even actually on these keyboard shortcuts, and that's Control A. So normally, let's say we wanted to select all of these lines at once. Well, we could use the Select More option here, and we can use this and select them all. Or, we can also use our Shift. If we hold down Shift and select the range, it's going to select all of those cells in a range. But even quicker, if you wanted to select everything at once, would be to simply just go Control A, and that's going to select all lines at once for us, Then from here, we can go ahead and say delete these if we needed to. Okay, so learn those keyboard shortcuts. They'll make your life a heck of a lot easier. Okay, the next thing I wanted to show you guys here was the standard journals. So this is just a way for you to bring on some journal entries into the system here. Journal entries that you're doing on a pretty regular basis, so on a monthly basis, daily basis, or what have you. And so I already have one standard journal set up here. It's for rent. So I'm going to use the process get standard journals button here. And what this is going to do, it's going to allow me to select any of the standard journals that I have set up. So in this case, I'm going to choose my rent standard journal. And what that's going to do, it's going to insert my rent line here. So we can see here that I have entered in a line here for my rent journal entry. And I'm just going to finish off this here. So let's say this is going to a vendor. So let's say this goes to Fabricam. And there we go. So I've got this entry here ready to go in the system. I didn't really have to type anything in. I just had to do a few button clicks and it came right in for me. So you can see how you can utilize that in a variety of different ways. Next thing I wanted to show you guys was one of the things that I always recommend to all my clients that they should be doing, especially when they're first starting out in the system, is previewing your posting. So to do that, we can go to post here and there's a preview posting button. I believe in some of the journals, some of the other journals in the system, the preview posting can be under possibly the navigate button, which we don't have here. So it's kind of moving around in the system. And also, as they do updates, they tend to move this preview posting sometimes. But right now, we're going to find it here under the post print header here in this header, and we're going to choose preview posting. And what this is going to do, it's going to show us all the impacts of what posting is going to do. So we can see that it's going to create 2 general ledger entries for us. So it's going to hit our rent expense, as we could see from the journal entry. But we can also see that it's hitting account 20100, and presumably this is the posting group that's behind the vendor. Okay, so preview posting is very powerful if you're using customers and vendors and you want to make sure that you're hitting the correct control account. Preview posting allows you to do that. And it also shows us here the vendor ledger entry that's being created as well. Okay, so we can confirm that we're going to put an entry on the client's account for this rent. Okay, that takes us to the end of the webinar. So we've exported our entry to Excel and we've looked at what the Edit Excel can do for us. I showed you guys one of my favorite features, which is being able to do math in cells. And I showed you how to personalize the journal and why this may be important. We've touched a little bit on what batches are and the different journal templates we have in the system. And I showed you some shortcuts to select multiple rows. And lastly, I recommended that we do preview posting on all of our entries just to see which accounts are being impacted on each posting.